Hi guys, how's it going? My name is Sarah Birch, and this is my first ever true crime video that I'm attempting to do on this channel. So if you are new here, then hello, welcome. I have a bunch of other videos on my channel ranging from dance choreography videos to fashion and thrifting videos to podcast episodes, but I've always had a love and passion for true crime and specifically just like the darker psychology of people. And I just thought it was about time I give it a whirl and see how it goes. I'm going in pretty bold for my first ever case because this is not a simple case. This is not a short case. This is a very long case. It's mind-blowing. It's convoluted. There's so many different players, so many different characters, and the way it all comes together in the end is completely wild, so make sure you stick around for that. For those of you who never miss a true crime release on Netflix, they recently released, I believe it was in 2024, a documentary on this case called Lover, Stalker, Killer. I have my notes here, so I'm just verifying that. But that doesn't mean you click away. That does not mean that you just go, oh, well, I'll just watch it on Netflix then, because if I'm being honest, I didn't love the Netflix documentary. I watched it with my boyfriend, and it was really dramatized, and there was a lot of, obviously they have actors come in to recreate scenes, and I always find that a bit cheesy if I'm being honest, and then they were adding, spooky sound effects in the background, and, apparitions, and, making it seem more of, a haunting, and that's just, not how I feel about the case, so there's the Netflix documentary, and there's also a book by Leslie Rule called A Tangled Web. And that title alone, A Tangled Web, should tell you everything you need to know about this case. Speaking of Netflix, I really feel like this case reminds me a lot of the amazing show Baby Reindeer. That's probably my favorite show of all time. I can't get over how good Baby Reindeer was. And obviously, if you've seen Baby Reindeer, this isn't really that much of a spoiler, but there is a case of stalking, very severe stalking that takes place over text and emails over the course of years. And that is very similar to what we're going to get into today. So I'm curious if you're going to notice any parallels as well. If you do, then comment them below. But before we get started, I know this has been the longest intro ever. Guys, I'm new at this. I'm sorry. I just want to give a quick trigger warning. I feel like if you click onto a true crime case, you kind of have to be prepared for some dark subject matter. But I just wanted to say that we will be discussing psychological abuse and stalking, child abuse, animal abuse, and murder. Okay, let's strap in. Should that be my go-to thing? Strap in, guys. No, I hate it. This case takes us to Omaha, Nebraska, where 37-year-old single mom Cari Farver made the trip actually to Omaha to partake in a little dinner date with a local mechanic named Dave Grupa. So although Carrie actually lived in Macedonia, Iowa, which is a smaller town, obviously in the state over, she actually would commute to work about 40 minutes to travel to Omaha, which is where she worked as a computer programmer, or it also said that she was a data analyst. I'm not sure if those are the same things, but I think it's, she worked in IT for a company called West Corporation in Omaha. Dave and Carrie were only seeing each other for a few weeks when all of this drama kicks off. And both were seemingly excited about the potential of a new friendship, or let's be honest, a little more than a friendship. Things were really good for both Carrie and Dave respectively at this time, and I'm sure neither person would have ever thought in a million years that this seemingly innocent dinner date at Applebee's would lead to such catastrophic and devastating outcomes. But first, let's go back to the beginning a little bit. Cari Farver was born on November 30th, 1974 to mother Nancy and father Dennis. Cari loved her family and made a big effort to stay involved in her friends' lives and her mother's lives, and she would actually call her mother every single day to check in on her and have a chat. In different documentaries and videos I've seen, her friends and family would describe her as gregarious, friendly, vivacious, very funny, and also very, very smart. And I feel like you have to be smart to go on to be a computer programmer. Her and her mom actually also shared a passion for the theater and drama, which actually I have the same passion with my mom, so I understand what it's like to share a love of the theater with your mom. And Carrie would actually partake in several shows throughout high school. She went on to post-secondary education, and after that, when Carrie was actually 22, she became pregnant with her then boyfriend, and this was obviously very unexpected, but Carrie pretty much decided right away that she was going to have this baby and that she was going to be a mother. However, despite what could have been really good news for the couple, it didn't seem to be great news, and the couple actually broke up and didn't work out. So Carrie became a single mother at the young age of 22. From that moment on, from the moment her son Max was born, her whole life would now revolve around him. Cari was determined to be the best mother she could be, but as a few years went on and she got into her later 20s, she started to battle with her mental health and suffer from several depressive episodes and anxiety attacks. Obviously, she went to get help or potentially get a diagnosis, and she was actually diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which is very common amongst people in their 20s. And Cari was given medication to sort of remedy this. However, there were moments when she would get off her medication because she didn't like the way it was making her feel. It made her feel groggy and hazy and tired. So as I said, Cari eventually landed her dream job at the West Corporation in Omaha. And this would all lead her to the meet cute moment of meeting Dave Grupa, when she actually brought her car into the mechanic shop that Dave was working in to get it looked at. And when Dave looked up from the car he was working on, he kind of saw her, and it was literally like out of a movie. He just immediately was taken with her, thought she was beautiful, thought she seemed lively, and he said that she just had a special quality about her, and he was immediately intrigued. Despite the fact that he was so taken with her and he thought she was so beautiful, he refrained from going up and asking her out while he was on the job because she was technically a client and he was helping her out with her car. And while I would honestly probably do it, some people would probably find that unprofessional, so he decided to just let her go on her merry way. However, the two actually connected on Plenty of Fish, which was the dating app, or I guess it would have been a website at the time, the dating website that Dave was on, and Cari was also obviously on it, as the two virtually ran into each other. And when Dave saw that, it probably affirmed to him that she was single, and when they matched, he was like, oh, she's also interested. I wonder if she remembers me. And that kind of just gave him the confidence he needed to actually ask her out and see if anything would happen. But first, let's just talk a little bit about Dave Grupa. Who is this mystery mechanic man? He was your average, normal, nice guy. Literally, not to sound rude, but there's nothing particularly super memorable about Dave Grupa, and I don't mean that as an insult. He was a father of 2 children, newly separated from his longtime partner, Amy. Devoted to being a good dad. He worked as a mechanic for many years. He was a handsome guy. He was just a dude living his life. He was 35 years old at the time that he met Carrie, and he was relatively new to the dating pool. As I said, him and his ex, Amy Flora, had been together for many years, and he was recently single, and he was in a new town. He had just moved to Omaha, and he was just ready to see what was out there. He was ready to dip his toe back into the dating pool, so to speak. So he joined Plenty of Fish, as I mentioned earlier. He was dating around, and he was pretty transparent about that. He wasn't super interested, especially after a very long monogamous relationship. He wasn't super interested in becoming the leading man in another woman's life. He kind of wanted to focus on himself, have a bit of fun, hang out with his kids, but he didn't want to be completely single either. He wanted to, enjoy the splendor of being with women. But what I will say about him, as much as there's part of me that wants to eye roll and be like, fuckboy alert, I don't think that's the case. He was always very transparent and honest with these women about what his capabilities were, what his limitations were. He's like, this is where I'm at. This is what I can offer. I'm down to do casual. I need to put my kids first, whatever. And I do respect someone who's at least honest about it. You can't really get mad at that. So Dave and Cari met for their first date at Applebee's on October 29th, 2012. The date apparently went quite well, as he actually invited her back to his apartment and she agreed. So obviously she wasn't repelled by him. I think they both had pretty easy chemistry. They were attracted to each other, and her son Max was actually staying with her mom for the night, so she was free. She was like, heck yeah, let's go hang out with this guy. Let's see where the night goes. Yeah. So they're back at his apartment, and before, the door even closes, this is what Dave says, but certainly before clothes come off, Liz actually also keeps it real with Dave, and she says, look, Dave, I like you, but just so you know, I'm not interested in a serious monogamous relationship. I just want to have fun. I just kind of want to be free, but also spend time with someone fun, and that's just where I'm at. And Dave was like, hallelujah, because that's exactly what Dave was looking for too. And they were just completely on the same page from that point on. So obviously this discussion that was actually prompted by Cari was music to Dave's ears. But before they could really get too much further into their amazing date, there was a buzz at the door, the security door of Dave's apartment. And he was like, who's that? That's weird. So he goes down and he sees that it is actually a woman named Liz Goyer. As I mentioned, Dave was single and open to dating multiple women and very honest about that. And the actual first woman that he ever connected with on Plenty of Fish. Also, for my potential younger viewers, if you don't know what Plenty of Fish is, it was the OG Tinder. I remember my sister joined Plenty of Fish in like grade 10 and I just made fun of her, which is so awful because girly was just trying to get some love, but I was like, Emily, you're 15. Why are you on Plenty of Fish? Anyway, that's besides the point. So the first person that Dave actually connected with on Plenty of Fish was this woman named Liz Goyer, and they seemingly had a lot in common. She was also a single mom in her 30s with 2 kids, and they really bonded over that, and they had like a shared understanding of maybe what the other person was going through, trying to navigate like co-parenting. And she was also into like punk rock and motorcycles, and she just seemed like a cool chick. And Dave was like, she's not the love of my life, but she's cool, let's hang out. They went to a coffee shop for their first date and apparently went pretty well, and they continued to see each other casually after that. Liz owned her own business called Liz's Housekeeping Services, and she also owned 4 pets. So she had 2 dogs, a cat, and a snake. She also had an interest in sci-fi, which Dave also had an interest in sci-fi. So he called this whole situationship, I guess you can say, a match made in heaven. They continued to hit it off, see each other, sleep together, but Dave pretty much knew from the get-go that it wasn't going to go anywhere super serious. He said, later on in interviews that he didn't find, this is brutal, he didn't find Liz particularly smart or witty or beautiful. He liked her, but he wasn't like in love with her, He knew that the relationship wouldn't really go much further than just kind of like sleeping together and having fun. And he apparently did make that clear to her on multiple occasions that that's kind of where his head was at. And she was disappointed, but she also was like, that's fine. I'm fine with that. That's cool. I'm a cool girl. I'm cool. It's good. It's good. But like, I think both of them probably knew deep down that she wasn't really okay with it. But I mean, he said his piece, and she seemingly was happier getting bits and pieces of Dave than having none of Dave at all. And we've all been there. We have all been there. It's one of those situations where and we've all been there, like I said, where one person in the dynamic clearly likes the other person more, and it's very obvious, and there's a bit of breadcrumbing involved and a little bit of leading on involved, and you think you're being honest, but maybe you're not being fully honest, and the other person probably knows that they should go, but they like you too much and they don't want to go. And I think we all can relate to that in one way or another, whether we've been the Dave or the Liz. And I'm sure for Dave, he probably knew that he should just leave her alone and move on. But I mean, she was down to continue to sleep together. And at the end of the day, Dave is a red-blooded man. So if she's going to be like, yeah, sure, I'm down to sleep together, I'm super down, then you can't fault the guy, really. But I'm sure, anyway, I don't want to give too much away, but I'm sure he wishes things all went differently. So as Dave continued to keep their relationship in the casual category, he was also seeing other women, like I said, and I think as this went on, Liz became more and more disturbed by this fact and just really discontented with the whole thing. And this was evidenced by the fact that on Dave's date with Carrie, somehow, I don't know, Liz, I don't know whether she knew about it or whether it was just unfortunate timing, but she was blowing up Dave's phone while he was out on this date. Would not stop texting him, and he trying to ignore it, but eventually he kind of just was like 1 second and opened his phone and sent her a text that just said, I'm on a date, I can't talk, I will connect with you later, and sent that off, and then went back to his date with Carrie. Well, later that same night, who appears at Dave's security door? None other than the recently spurned, I guess you could say, Liz Goyer. When Dave came down to the door to see what she wanted, she said she was here to get her belongings and she wouldn't be long, but she needed to get her belongings. And she was kind of upset and he didn't really know what to do, so he told her to stay there. And he went back up kind of begrudgingly to his apartment to explain this whole situation to Carrie, because at this point he kind of just needs to air it out, So he's very honest with Carrie about the situation, and Carrie actually handled it like a champ, and she was quite understanding, and she was just like, look, I'm gonna go, you deal with this. This sounds a little bit complicated, but I had a great time, and cool, bye. So Dave goes to walk Carrie out of the apartment, and as they go down, she has to go out the security door, and she actually passes Liz on her way, and then carries on to her car. Carries on, And the two didn't speak. The two didn't have any sort of memorable encounter. You know, they kind of just brushed past each other. They obviously knew who the other person was, but there wasn't really a need for like words to be shared, if that makes sense. And then Liz went up and grabbed her belongings, and Dave kind of dealt with that situation. However, later on, they actually reconnected Dave and Carrie over the phone later on the same night. And Dave was kind of like, hey, I'm still up. Like, I'm still thinking about you. And Carrie was like, okay, well, I'm at my apartment in Macedonia and my son's not here because my mom agreed to watch him for the night. So why don't you come over and we'll continue with the fun at my place. So Dave hopped in his car and drove the 40 to 45 minutes to Macedonia, and the two continued the fun at Carrie's apartment. From that point on, the two were kind of just like enjoying each other's company, seeing each other casually. I mean, they definitely were not in a relationship, but they were spending time with each other and communicating, and one could assume sleeping together, and both were really enjoying it and really enjoying getting to know each other and felt like this was a real bond. So Carrie's job actually had a big project that she was working on, and she was expected to spend more hours at work. And because of this kind of extra work stress, Dave actually welcomed her to stay at his place on multiple nights to just kind of ease some of her stress so she wouldn't have to commute back and forth to Macedonia, which again was like a 45-minute trip one way. So Dave was like, look, like, I like you, I trust you, we're chill, like, just stay at mine. And this actually worked out well because Max, who's Carrie's son, in case you've forgotten, Max was actually staying for a few days during all of this project chaos. Max was staying with Carrie's mom, Nancy. So Max was taken care of, and Carrie was like, okay, I'll just stay at your place for a couple of days and we'll like make the most of it because work is so busy. So on the morning of November 13th, 2012, Dave got up. Carrie was also awake. The two were chatting a little bit, but Dave had to rush out the door to get to work around 6:30 a.m. And I think Carrie was just like sitting on the couch, just like going over some notes or something. I don't know exactly what she was doing, but she was staying behind a little bit longer. So Dave gave her a kiss and told her to have a good day and headed out the door. And I'm assuming just was like expecting Carrie to lock up when she left and they'd see each other later that night or the next day or whatever. So that was the last time Dave actually ever saw Cari Farver. Later that same morning, Carrie's boss became quite concerned when Cari didn't show up for work. So he tried to call her a few times and try to get in touch with her to see what was going on. Maybe there was a valid reason that she wasn't at work. And there was no calls being answered, no messages being responded to, and he was getting a little freaked out. At the same time, actually, Carrie's mother was also concerned because she also didn't hear from her daughter. So later on that day, Dave is at work and he's just doing his thing, and he receives a text message from Cari. And to his utter shock, Cari sends him a quick text just saying, hey, I think I should move in. He had one of those moments, I'm sure, where he was like, is this a joke? Because they'd only been seeing each other for, I think, 2 weeks at this point. So Dave responded just kind of saying, Cari, we've already talked about this. That's not something I'm able to do right now. And this set Cari off. She started sending him all of these messages saying, I hate you, I'm seeing someone else anyway, you've ruined my life, you're a horrible person, just completely slashing apart his character, and really seemed like a woman scorned, a woman rejected. You know, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. That's like my favorite quote of all time. And I guess this could be an example of it, but honestly, Dave was like, what the heck is going on? Like, this girl is so chill. We've spent so much time together and we were on the same page. Our chemistry was so effortless. And now all of a sudden it's like a switch has flipped or a screw has come loose and she is verbally attacking me. So Dave was definitely very dumbfounded by the whole thing, but I guess he just kind of assumed, you know, like we probably all would. He was like, you know what? I don't actually know her that well, and maybe she was putting on a facade for the first few weeks, but now this is her real character, and maybe it's for the best that this doesn't go any further. Not to compare women against each other, to pit women against each other, but I think Dave felt more of that relationship potential with Cari than he ever did with Liz. He really liked her, and he was sad that the relationship wasn't going to go anywhere, but he just kind of like made peace with it. When he got home that night, all of Cari's stuff, she had a few belongings, obviously, because she'd been staying at his apartment. All of her stuff was gone. She was gone, and he just kind of was like, all right, toodaloo. However, was it over? Of course it wasn't over. Only a few days after that initial text exchange between Carrie and Dave when he was at work, he started receiving a vicious barrage of texts and emails coming in from what seemed to be Carrie Farver. These were threatening emails, stalking emails, calling him names, saying that she hated him, saying all of this horrible stuff. And he just literally could not believe that this mature, chill mother who he had spent a few weeks with had just completely flipped her lid and turned out to be a little crazy, for a lack of a better word. And it turns out that Dave was not the only person that Carrie was directing her rage on. Dave's casual on-again, off-again girlfriend, Liz Goyer, who I mentioned earlier, also approached Dave to tell him that she had been receiving these strange, horrible texts from a woman named Cari, and she was a little bit freaked out. She didn't know what was going on. And Dave was like, oh, Lord, here we go. In the majority of the text directed towards Liz, she was kind of painted out as the other woman, like the romantic rival. And a lot of the texts were telling Liz to leave Dave and to cut off Dave because Dave belonged to Carrie. That was kind of the underlying message behind Carrie's text to Liz. And when Dave found out about this, he felt so bad. He was like, Liz, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I'm so sorry. Like, I went on a few dates with this girl and she's been harassing me and now she's harassing you. And not that it's his fault at all, because it's never the victim's fault in a stalking case ever. But of course he felt bad. He felt secondhand guilt that Liz's life was now going to be uprooted as well. You know, in their minds, to them, they were both being victimized by this same horrible thing. And the only other person in this whole world that could empathize with what Dave was going through or what Liz was going through was the opposite person, because they were both going through the same thing, if that makes sense. So it really solidified their connection, and I think they found some peace and comfort with each other during this whole situation. But it didn't just stop at texts, okay? It did not just stop at texts. Carrie actually went on to break into Liz's house, into the garage. She actually spray painted with black paint on the wall, "Whore from Dave." I don't understand grammatically what that means. Like, I was like, am I reading this the wrong way? But it said "whore from Dave." I don't know. And obviously Liz pretty much assumed immediately this was Carrie. And Liz let Dave know, and Dave was like, Jesus Christ, like, I can't believe now she's going into Liz's home. Like, this is crazy. It's escalating. So while Dave and Liz were growing more increasingly scared of Carrie, Carrie's family were becoming increasingly scared for her. She sent a cryptic message to her mom, just kind of bluntly explaining that I got a new job in Kansas. I'm moving there. I'm leaving this life behind to start a new life. Take care of Max. She said it was either between this or she was going to check herself into a mental hospital. And both of those scenarios did not make Nancy feel very good. She told Nancy, you know, Max is yours. You take guardianship of him, take care of him, and didn't really give any idea as to when she'd be back or what the long-term plan was. She was seemingly keeping things kind of vague, but definitely very cryptic. Same sort of reaction as Dave. This left Nancy completely confused, dumbfounded, like, what has happened to my daughter? She was fine like a day ago. But then she kind of thought maybe, like, just trying to rationalize this, trying to make sense of it, she kind of thought maybe she went off her meds and that's what's gone on, and maybe she's having a bit of an episode. But as more time went on, Nancy just did not feel like that was the answer. Obviously concerned about her daughter, she actually filed a missing persons report with the local police. She decided that this was the right thing to do after Carrie did not show up to her half-brother's wedding, and she was supposed to show up there and pick up her son Max on the way and go there together with Max, and she never showed up. And apparently Max was sitting at the entire wedding with the rest of his family, staring at the doors the entire time, hoping his mom would come in, and she never did. And this was kind of too much for Nancy to make peace with. She knew something was wrong. Carrie loved being a mother. That was her first priority above anything else. And she knew that no matter what Carrie was going through or what demons she was facing, she would not do this to Max, and she would not miss out on this big family event. And therefore, something must be seriously wrong. And as I mentioned, Carrie had had bipolar disorder for many years at this point. Like, she was diagnosed in her early 20s. She's now in her later 30s. And she had gone off her medication at multiple different points before this and had never done anything this drastic, had never reacted this way. This was just simply not Carrie's character. So when she told the police about Carrie and was kind of giving them the backstory, she did happen to mention that Carrie was diagnosed with bipolar. And as you can probably guess, this kind of eased the police off a little bit in terms of the urgency of the case, because they just kind of were like, oh, you know, she's probably having a mental health break. She's probably going in a manic episode. She'll come back. Don't worry about it. And honestly, I've heard lots of cases, and this is a bit of an ethical gray area, but where family members or like friends who report someone missing will actually purposefully leave out the fact that they have a disorder, you know, like schizophrenia, bipolar, like a disorder like this, because the minute you say it, it kind of removes the urgency from the police, and it's like, oh, they've probably done this to themselves, or they're probably, and they kind of default to blaming the mental health disorder instead of assuming that something like criminal or sinister could have happened to that person. And it's, like I said, it's a bit of a gray area. Like, I sort of understand it from the police point of view, and I definitely understand it from the family point of view. On November 17th, Nancy actually received a text containing a photo of one of Liz's checks. So apparently Liz's checkbook had been reported missing probably around the same time that Carrie broke into her garage. And so one of Liz's checks was used to purchase, through Carrie, an old bedroom set that was actually going to be sold for $5,000 according to this check. The signature on the check said Shanna Goyer. And just so you know, you're like, who the heck is Shanna? Liz's actual name was Shanna Elizabeth Goyer, but she went by Liz. The fact that Carrie was apparently selling this bedroom set completely devastated and shocked Nancy, because this wasn't just any old bedroom set. This was a family heirloom that had been in their family for a long time and had sentimental value. Again, this was just something where Nancy was like, I know my daughter. She would not do this. Nancy sent Carrie a message and said, before I give away this bedroom set, I need to hear your voice. And that was not going to happen. Instead of sending a voice note or a voice memo or calling her mom, she just sent a flurry of text messages immediately to Nancy, calling her a horrible mother, degrading her. And while Nancy was at first devastated, obviously, to be spoken to this way by her own daughter, she kind of like took a step back and was like, no, this just can't be my daughter. Like, I can't even get upset over this, because my daughter would not speak to me this way, and I'm not going to let it upset me, because I just know Carrie, and she would not speak to me this way. Carrie was also popping off on Facebook. Facebook was everything in 2012. And Carrie would post these kind of strange updates about herself, or kind of responding to photos of herself. People just were like, this does not sound like Carrie. You know, obviously people have a certain way of distinguishing themselves, just like they would with a speaking voice, with like a texting voice, or like how they write online. And as I said, Carrie was really smart, really intelligent, and apparently prided herself on having proper grammar and writing things properly, double checking things before she sent them off. Her mom said that she would never send off an email without just rereading it first and making sure that it was grammatically correct. So the fact that all these messages and emails and Facebook posts were full of spelling errors, full of grammatical errors, and just didn't have a very eloquent tone to them was a huge red flag. Picture the kind of childlike writing that you would see in the texts and emails in Baby Reindeer, and you're kind of like squinting at it trying to make sense of it. That's kind of the same sort of vibe that we're getting here from Carrie. It almost seems like a grade 5 student is writing these emails and texts, and like honestly, that's kind of insulting to people in grade 5. Carrie even went on to miss her own father's funeral, which was truly the final straw for Max and Nancy, where they knew something was seriously wrong. But to miss her own father's funeral, who was sick and suffering with stomach cancer at the time before Carrie even went missing, like Carrie knew he was sick, that just seemed unbelievable. Carrie sent this brief, emotionless text to her mom just saying, sorry, I missed the funeral, like no punctuation, nothing. And her mom wrote back, I need to hear your voice. I need to speak with you. And that never happened. Despite the large number of texts and calls and Facebook comments and stuff that everyone in this case had been receiving from Carrie, not one person had seen her in person physically or heard her voice. Not one person. Okay? Just keep that in mind. And if you watch Catfish religiously growing up, like I did, you would know that when someone refuses to share their voice with you, even when you ask outright or like something fishy's going on, okay? Like that is the biggest red flag. If you're talking to someone online and they refuse to share their voice with you, red flag. However, police weren't as concerned with this missing persons report as they probably would be with someone else, because technically Carrie was still showing signs of life. She was still messaging people, being active on social media. So while it was obviously strange that no one had seen her or heard her voice, they weren't really doing too much about it. And Carrie also went on to miss her own son Max's 15th birthday, and this was just really devastating for Nancy and Max. They knew Carrie better than anyone else in the world, and they simply knew without a shadow of a doubt at this point that someone else was impersonating Carrie Farver on social media and via email and text. And soon, in 2015, 2 detectives were going to turn this whole case around, and they're going to come to the same exact realization. So in the months and years that followed Carrie's initial disappearance, Dave Grupa, poor Dave Grupa, was literally not ever free of harassing texts and threatening stalking messages from Carrie Farver. He would be receiving upwards of 50 to 100 texts a day or emails a day. He was clearly being followed by Carrie because he would be like at work talking to a customer, and he would get a text at that exact moment, like, I see you at work talking to a customer. And so he'd like kind of panic and like look around and like run around the area trying to find Carrie. And he never once, in all these instances where he'd kind of like get up and start searching around, because he obviously wanted to find her and like get some freaking answers out of her, he never once was able to see Carrie. And no other neighbors, like when police spoke to neighbors after these situations, like police would maybe go up to people who live in the area and be like, did you see this girl? Like, she was reported here at this time. And they're like, nope, we don't. Like, no one saw Carrie Farver. Not one witness, not one person, not Dave, not police. She also would send these type of texts when Liz and Dave were hanging out. So she would send both of them, simultaneously send them both texts being, you know, I see you're with that whore, stay away from her. And in that moment, you know, they'd both show each other their phone, like, oh my God, she's at it again. And so Dave kind of like thought, obviously, like, there's no way Liz is doing this because she's right here. I'm watching her and she's not texting anybody, and she's also being victimized by this horrible person. This is nuts. But at one point, Carrie actually made a fake obituary for Liz Goyer. And it read at the bottom, she wrote, I didn't know her very well, except for that she was a whore and a man-stealer. Thank God she is gone. Carrie even sent Dave and Nancy, so that's Carrie's mother, multiple addresses at times, or she even had a man, in like a man's voice, call Nancy and say, I'm at this address, I'm at a homeless shelter. Or she'd text Dave and be like, I'm at this apartment. And Nancy or Dave, or, you know, accompanied by the police, would go out and search these places, and there would not be any trace of Carrie. And it was just like this wild goose chase and just continued mindfuck of these people. Every time they'd get their hopes up, they'd be dashed, and then they'd get their hopes up again, and then they'd be dashed. I mean, obviously I feel bad for Dave, but I feel so bad for poor Nancy. The messages to Dave, it seemed, would like constantly flip-flop between love and hatred. She absolutely would be like, I love you, I think we should be together, we're going to end up together, no one else will be with you but me. And then in the next minute, it's like, I hate you, I hope you die, like, you're a horrible person. So it's like giving complete emotional whiplash to Dave. And Dave explained that there was just like an ever-present paranoia and just fear within him that he just kind of grew accustomed to. He just sort of started to live with this. Like, what else could he do? The police hadn't really done anything, and he had tried to obviously block her number. Obviously, he tried to block this number so many times, block the email, and Carrie would just pop back up with a brand new phone number, brand new email. And the emails would always be like a variation of Carrie Farver. So it'd be like Carrie.Farver, or like Farver.Carrie, or like C.Farver, you know, on and on and on. Like, just making new email accounts any chance that she could whenever Dave blocked her. The emails came from at least 30 different email accounts, and the text came from at least 30 different cell phone numbers. So this was extreme. Dave admits that around this point, when it was just ceaseless, he was on the verge of a mental breakdown, and he apparently started drinking more than he was before. I mean, you can't blame the guy. He's just probably looking for a way to cope with the never-ending stress of a stalker threatening your lives and the lives of your loved ones. And in potentially the strangest turn of events so far in this case, it does get a little weirder later on, so stay tuned. One day, Dave's just living his life and he receives a email with photos attached from, who else? Carrie. And it shows a brunette woman tied up in kind of like a fetal position, I'll insert photos, with duct tape across her mouth in a trunk of a car. And the woman obviously looks distressed because she's allegedly, it seems, being kidnapped based on these photos. And Dave, honestly, having like probably zero fucks to give at this point, just being completely exhausted by all this, he kind of sniffed bullshit right away. Like he just had a feeling that this was one of Carrie's hoaxes. But it did look a little bit like Liz in the photo. So he followed up with Liz and just double checked like, hey, girlie, are you okay? Is this you? I got photos of a brunette girl tied up in a car. And Liz was like, oh my God, Dave, you're so sweet for asking. Like, Dave, I can't believe you were so worried about me, but I'm okay, Dave. It wasn't me. Like, everything's fine. But thank you so much for caring. Like, Like, she was eating it up like rice pudding, this like newfound attention from Dave, because Dave hadn't really been seeing her that much before this point. Dave had kind of taken a step back. You know, Dave was continuing to see other women. In the email that Carrie sent Dave during this whole situation with the lady in the trunk, it says, from Carrie Farver to Dave Grupa, and the subject is, you should read. But essentially says, you will do exactly as I say, and I will let her go. You will dump Liz, and you will start seeing me again, and no arguments about it. That's really what it says. As soon as you agree, I will let her go. I might give her phone back. If you don't agree, she will stay in my trunk since no one knows my car and you won't find her. So tick-tock. You will call her phone and tell her you have to get rid of her. Leave a voicemail. I will be having her play it so I can hear if it. Not them. That's it. She dies in my trunk. So don't fuck with me. Don't fuck with I am sick of her getting what belongs to me. You can't play with my feelings. Understand? Do it or say goodbye to her. I just lost 50 brain cells reading that, honestly. But yeah, that was the email that Dave got, I believe, accompanied with the photos of the lady in the trunk. And he was like, what? So after Liz confirmed that it wasn't her and she was fine, the two of them just carried on with life. You know, it was like, okay, Carrie's just back at it again. And at this point, Dave and Liz had actually created a nickname. It's not really that creative, but it's fitting, for Carrie, called Crazy Carrie. So when they talk about Carrie or both receive text from Carrie at the same time, they'd be like, oh, here we go again, it's Crazy Carrie. And I guess that was just probably one of their ways of like coping with the situation and making light of the situation. 2 days later, someone spotted a black Ford Explorer in Dave's parking lot, and he thought maybe it was Carrie because this was the same car she drove. So a forensic investigator came out, because obviously Dave like called this in, and they took a look at the car, but it was actually under a bunch of snow, so it didn't seem like anyone had been driving it recently at all. Like, it's not like Carrie had just been there like an hour before. Like, this car had clearly been there for a while. And they did a full sweep of like fingerprints and stuff like that inside the car, but it appeared that the car was wiped clean because there was only one fingerprint, and I think it was only a half fingerprint in the entire car, which is obviously not normal. Like, that is deliberately wiped down. Like, you're not going to step into some... If a crime scene investigator was to go into my car right now, they'd find so many fingerprints and DNA in there. But it was on an actual little can of mints, like a tin of mints that was in the center console. It was on the top of a can of mints that was in the center console of the car. So they obviously retained that fingerprint, but that was it. Like, they ran it through CODIS, and they didn't find any matches, unfortunately. And so, but now they had the car, and this was Carrie's car, and they were like, okay, well, you know, we'll keep this in evidence, but like, we don't really have much to go off of right now. But it was a clue, I guess. By this point in this whole situation, Dave was once again starting to get really annoyed with Liz. Liz apparently was just very clingy, very high maintenance, would send him these long, kind of drawn out paragraphs, and just was not being a cool girl at all. And I'm not really a cool girl either when it comes to love and dating, but like, as far as I'm aware, Liz was taking it to another level. You know, Liz had zero chill and Dave was over it. So Dave would keep kind of dealing with this. It was like a pattern, like a loop. Like, he'd kind of give Liz another chance, which was, I think, slightly encouraged by the fact, or enabled by the fact, that he felt bad for her because he'd kind of gotten her in this situation. And then they'd get back together, and then he'd get annoyed with her and kind of fed up with her, and then they'd like break up again, and then it would keep happening. That same pattern would keep happening over and over and over. So they were in an off period right now. You know, they were very on again, off again, and at this point they were in an off period. So there was like 2 separate investigations going on in 2 separate states, right? So throughout all this time in Iowa, Carrie's mother was investigating with police there, like, my daughter's missing, find my daughter. Meanwhile, in Nebraska, Carrie and Liz are working with police because of this never-ending stalking and cyber stalking. So there's kind of 2 separate investigations, both centered around Cari Farver, but they're kind of taking different approaches. But anyway, in Nebraska, in Omaha, obviously Liz and Dave had reported this to police multiple times, that, these threats, the vandalism, etc., etc. So they decided in January 2013 to go through the phones of Dave and Liz. And this is what was called a logical download. So this essentially just means that they're only taking like the surface level of data, like everything that's currently on your phone. You're not doing like a full deep dive and getting all of the deleted data and like all the history that's been erased. It's just called a logical download. And from this initial look at Dave and Liz's cell phones, everything seemed perfectly normal. And in February of 2013, Liz actually contacted police because someone had keyed her car and carved the word whore into the side of her car. So this is another act of vandalism. As you probably remember, there was also the whore from Dave that was spray painted in her garage. So now someone had keyed the word whore into her car. Actually, sorry, apparently someone wrote, whore, stop seeing Dave, which is like a long sentence to be keying in the middle of the open air with like people around. Like, that's a long sentence to be carving into a car, but whatever. Apparently that's what it said. So a few months later, on May 3rd, 2012, Max worked up the courage to finally send his mom a text. She'd been missing for 6 months, I believe, at this point. And Max probably missed his mama, poor kid. So he reached out and he just kept it, tentative, and he just said hi. And Liz responded saying, "Hey, what's up, little man?" And Max was kind of immediately like suspicious of this because he's like, he knows his mom and like she does not call him little man, especially now that he's 15 and in high school. And like, it just didn't seem right to him. Like, his mom would not have called him that. So he was kind of just like blunt. "Honestly, you go, Max." And he sent her a text and said, "For me to really know that this is you, you need to answer these 3 personal questions." The first question was, what was his middle name? The second question was, what was our first boxer's name, like the dog? And the third question was, what was his childhood best friend's name? Obviously, his mother would easily be able to answer these like no question. But those questions went unanswered and Carrie's account just ghosted him. Carrie posts this big old update on Facebook, the type of update that literally you would take one look at and be like, I'm not reading that. But in this case, obviously, if you're looking for your daughter or your mother, you would. On May 18th, Cari Farver wrote, "I have answered enough questions to prove myself to everyone. I am done. You can't either believe I am your daughter, mother, sister, and friend that you have known your whole life, or you can just leave me alone. I have proven myself over and over, and I'm done. I left on my own free will, and I am sick of everyone giving me a hard time for doing what I needed to do. I am not missing. I just don't want to come home right now. I am a grown woman, and if I feel like leaving home, I have the right. I asked my son Max to come with me, but you didn't want to." I don't think that's true, by the way. "So when I am ready to come back home, I will. I am sorry for hurting everyone and just up and leaving. I know I have upset some of you, but I needed to do this for me. Sorry, and I hope someday you can forgive me. I love you all very much, but I need time to sort things out." On August 17th, this gets even juicier. This situation gets even crazier, okay? I haven't even scratched the surface. Liz calls 911 because someone set fire to her home. Yeah, so Dave is sitting at a bar, drinking a beer, just probably trying to decompress from everything going on in his life right now. And he gets a frantic call from Liz who says, Carrie has set fire to my home, like it's burning to the ground. So obviously Dave rushes over to Liz's side and kind of like puts his arm around her and is trying to console her and like ask questions, and just, you know, like he feels absolutely horrible. There was no hope for this home. Like it was completely destroyed. Tragically, her animals, all her pets, had died in the fire. So her children were not harmed in the fire, but her 2 dogs, her cat, and her pet snake all died in the fire from smoke inhalation. Investigators, when they were checking out the scene, they found at least 6 different origin points of the fire, and they found traces of accelerant. So it was pretty clear, pretty much right off the bat, that this was an intentionally set fire to cause harm to Liz and her children. And so, of course, they go up to Liz and they're like, who would have wanted to do this? Like, can you think of anybody? And Liz obviously did not miss a beat in telling the investigators and like the fire detectives or fire marshal, I don't know, the fire people that, yeah, this was definitely Cari Farver.
From what I've seen so far, looking inside, it's pretty obvious this is an intentionally set fire.
The guy that I'm seeing, he has a girlfriend that he dated for 2 weeks, and she's been stalking me since November.
Do you know her name?
It's Carrie, Cari. But she has made threats towards me and my kids. She would kept texting me and telling me she wanted to kill me and my kids. You would think they were married as much as she's stalking me.
She even showed them an email that Carrie had sent, which said, and I quote, "I hope you and your kids burn to death." So this is pretty solid evidence, I guess, that Carrie did do this. Before Dave actually made it to the scene, he had received a text from Carrie that said, "I am not lying. I set the nasty whore's house on fire. I hope the whore and her kids die in it." So yeah, Carrie was essentially confirming this with both Dave and Liz, that she was the one behind the fire and killing all of the pets. The innocent pets, okay? So before the fire, Dave and Liz were actually not together. They were on one of their many off periods, okay? They were taking a break from each other. However, obviously, the news of this fire and just trying to be a good guy, trying to be a noble guy and like be there for her and support her emotionally, you know, it actually kind of rekindled their relationship. And, you know, obviously she's upset that her house has been destroyed, her animals have died, but the one silver lining from this whole horrible situation is that it actually brought her and Dave back together. There was a pattern, though, that was definitely emerging where it seemed like every time her and Dave were on an off period, or Dave, you know, cut her off and wanted a break from her, that is when something bad would happen to Liz, whether it be vandalism or at this point arson. I don't know, like if you are somewhat in tune with what's going on here, you probably have picked up that this is maybe a little manipulative and maybe a little bit too sketchy to be a coincidence. So eventually, these harassing texts that Dave and Nancy and Liz had been all receiving for almost a year at this point actually reached a new target. And this was Amy Flora. So Amy was actually the ex-partner of Dave and the mother of his children. And Amy and Dave had a pretty good co-parenting relationship. I mean, obviously they weren't like best friends, but you know, they were living their lives and co-parenting their kids. And Amy was absolutely shocked when she started receiving these horrible texts from some woman named Carrie. You know, the text would warn Amy to stay away from Dave and to stay out of his life. Amy would be out at the park with her kids and like receive a text from Carrie like, "Oh, your kids are swinging on the swings," or like, "Your kids are at the park." And of course, Amy would like scoop up her kids and get the hell out of there, because that's absolutely terrifying. But Amy actually made the decision, which I cannot blame her for. I think it's honestly fair, but she made the decision that the kids would no longer be able to go to Dave's house until this was sorted out. She said, "If you want to see them, come to me, but they're staying here 24/7 from now on," because obviously they were doing like some sort of split custody agreement. But she said, you know, it's not safe. Like, you're literally being stalked, and this girl knows where you live. And from this point on, they're staying with me. You can see them when you want, but you got to come to my place. And again, I don't blame her for this. Like, it's now time to briefly introduce another character in this story, a man, and this man's name is Todd Butterbaugh. So Todd is Liz's boyfriend. You heard that right, Liz's boyfriend. Okay, Liz and Todd met on a dating app in 2010 and continued to date until September 2015. So yes, if you're maybe like a little bit scratching your head, a little confused right now, Liz is a hypocrite. of the highest sort, okay? She was giving Dave a hard time constantly and like guilt tripping him for seeing other women, dating other women, when she low-key, high-key, had a boyfriend the entire time. She even moved in to live with Todd with her kids after her house burned down. So that's where she went to live for the years after her house burned down. She was living with him that whole time. And he was essentially playing dad to her kids, like living with her kids. You know, he was like a father figure for her kids, and he was essentially a husband figure for her. According to Todd, he believed the two of them were on the same page about being in a monogamous, long-term, serious relationship. It might not surprise you to hear that in 2013, Todd also started to receive weird texts from a lady named Cari. And in these texts, Cari explained to Todd that she was actually one of Liz's friends. And, you know, during this whole time, like multiple years that Liz was with Todd while she was also simultaneously being harassed and stalked by Cari, she never once told Todd about this. She didn't open up to him about it. She didn't tell him, which is weird, right? And the two eventually broke up in 2015, in September of 2015. Todd didn't deserve all that. Like, I'm just going to say that. Like, poor Todd. Poor Todd. He seems like a sweetie. I don't know the man, but based on his photo, he just seems like an innocent, sweet guy who just, you know, was just trying to be a good man, trying to take care of his lady, trying to take care of his lady's kids. And he got kind of caught up in this whole mess. Todd is innocent. I'm just going to say that now, guys. I don't know why I have such a soft spot for Todd. Leaving Todd for a moment and going back to Carrie's side of the family in Macedonia, Iowa. So this is kind of an interesting story. I decided that I wanted to keep it in. It's not like super, super relevant to the case, but if you're into sort of spirituality and stuff like I am, or dream psychology, then you might find this interesting, that there was a night that Nancy was actually visited by her ex-husband and Carrie's father, Dennis. And he came to her in a dream as like a, you know, version of himself and said, "Don't worry about Cari. She's with me. She's okay." Nancy already kind of had this gut feeling, this mother's intuition that Cari had died. Like, that's sort of what she knew deep down. But she claims that this dream and this sort of premonition from her ex-husband and Carrie's father, Dennis, it just completely solidified for her that her daughter was dead. Like, it kind of took her to a place of acceptance a little bit. And I can't talk too much about that part or I'm going to cry, but I do find that an interesting story within the whole story. Cari had remained missing for multiple years at this point when two new investigators from the Potawatomi, guys, that word's hard, Potawatomi County Sheriff's Office. Okay, I got it. They had heard about the story and they were intrigued and they kind of heard rumblings about it, but they decided the case had gone cold at this point. They didn't really have any further information. They decided they wanted to take another look at it. So Sergeant Jim Doty and investigator Ryan Avis, who were friends and colleagues, kind of came together and said, let's go talk to our boss. Let's just ask if we can reopen this case and give it a fresh set of eyes and see what we come up with. And they did. And thank God they did. These two are zaddies. Let's just say that, okay? They are heroes in this story, and I just love them. So Detective Avis and Doty kind of put their heads together and decided that they were going to work the case together but separately and kind of explore two different angles. So Detective Avis would examine the case working under the assumption that Cari was still alive and she was probably or likely behind all of this stalking and mischievous behavior. And Sergeant Doty would work under the assumption as he took on this case that Cari was dead. Because honestly, the two men were kind of leaning towards the fact that Cari was dead. And there's some reasons why. I mean, obviously no one had physically seen her or heard her voice for 2 years now. There was no activity on her bank accounts. There was 2 transactions, I think, like the day or the day after where she went missing, and that was it. Like nothing for 2 years in a grown woman's bank account. Like, how do you survive in the world without, without touching a bank account, not one transaction? So yeah, as I said, the two detectives were pretty certain at this point that Cari Farver was in fact dead.
How many people in the world are bipolar and they don't just go missing for no reason, whether they take their meds or don't take their meds?
And life had been good for Cari Farver. In fact, it had never been better.
She had a good income, a good house. I had come to the conclusion that I could not prove she was actually alive.
So they kind of had to shift their investigation to 2 new questions. What happened to Carrie Farver? And if she was dead, who was behind all of this stalking and all of this harassing? And that is where I'm going to leave part 1. Dun, dun, dun. Guys, I'm exhausted. I've been recording for an hour and a half, and I'm only through part 1. So I think it's best that I leave this at 2 parts. The second half is going to get wild. So please, please, please come back for that. But if you enjoyed this and you're in on this true crime journey with me, then please show some support by liking this video, sharing this video, subscribing to this channel would be the biggest thing you could do. Leaving a comment with your thoughts, your feelings, your initial responses, any connections you found, any other stories you've heard that remind you of the story. Like, I just want to hear it all. As long as you're not like trolling me, then let's get a discussion going, okay? I promise you are not going to want to miss part 2. Like, shit gets crazy. Okay, guys, I hope you have the best day ever. Thank you so much for watching and supporting me. Okay, bye.